So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first Softhouse webinar for product leaders. We've got a lot of good stuff to go through today, so thank you for joining us. I wanted to tell you first a little bit about what we're going to talk about, and then introduce Robert and myself. We recently did a survey of a group of product leaders because we wanted to find out what kind of challenges they were currently facing. And we had some ideas about what those were, but we got some interesting results back. And so that's what we're going to share with you today and talk about effective strategies for maintaining roadmap commitments when you're facing resource limitations such as budgets or a shortage of high caliber technical talent. So your hosts today are Robert Sestito and myself, Lee Garrison. Robert, do you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Sure, perfect. Hello, everyone. So I'm Robert. I'm the CEO of Softhouse Advisory Research Group. We shorten it sometimes to SHS, or Softhouse might be easier to say. So Softhouse, we are an agile research and advisory partner. And we support companies with their technology innovation roadmap, and we do this through consulting and professional services. A little bit about myself. Oh boy! So I've been working over the last 20 plus years in various capacities, and as well too in various industries. And really throughout that 20 plus years in helping organizations with their technology roadmap. Lee, what do we need to know about you?
Well, for those that are in Toronto and haven't run into me at a variety of the meetups, I've been working with product management teams for over 2 decades now as an executive leader in several high growth ventures, and also as a consultant, primarily working with B2B companies ranging in size from sort of startup to 500 employees. I'm pretty active in the product management community in the Toronto area. I'm one of the co-founders of Product Camp Toronto. I'm a director of the TPMA, the Toronto Product Management Association, and I spend some time advising at Mars as well. So I work with a lot of the startups there on product issues and go-to-market, product market fit type of challenges.
Fantastic.
So let's talk a little bit about the survey and walk you through some of the results, because I think a lot of you will be interested in what other product leaders had to say. So one of the first things we asked is what top product challenges are you facing, and so obviously, as you can see, maintaining roadmap commitments was a pretty significant one. But there were a couple of others that were, in sort of close second or third, starting with customer development, meeting delivery timelines, and technical debt growth.
Mm-hmm. And just a quick summary. What's technical debt for those that may not know what the term is?
So you hear about technical debt, occasionally, and especially development teams talk about it. It's also known as design debt or code debt, and it's a concept in software development that identifies the implied cost of rework that's caused by choosing a limited solution to implement now, rather than taking a sort of longer design approach. And so those shortcuts end up kind of accumulating, and eventually they have to be dealt with, and that's known as technical debt.
Perfect.
So we're going to talk a little bit about maintaining roadmap commitments and how what kind of strategies you can use to do that. Also, we're going to talk about dealing with limited budgets and the challenge of keeping or hiring, getting good high caliber technical talent. So the second question we asked about was the difficulty that these product leaders were having in acquiring or retaining high caliber technical resources. And interestingly, none of the respondents said it was a piece of cake. So everybody's finding it as a challenge, some more than others. Most would like it to be faster and less costly. And there's certainly not a small portion that's saying they're really having a big challenge with it. And that's pretty consistent with, what is going on in the industry. Robert, is that what you guys are seeing?
Absolutely. From our perspective, Softhouse, we're a global organization, so we're seeing it obviously in various markets. But I give an example just to kind of summarize, what we've seen. We had a client that was based out of New York, and and they were looking to capitalize on some engineering talent, specifically in the AI sector. So they spent an exorbitant amount of money in bringing over individuals from the West Coast, flew them in. And in this particular sector, it's one of those things where you need to lure the right type of good talent. So you kind of bend over backwards to kind of do this. And within less than 3 months of bringing this talent in, they'd already moved on. And so there was a large cost with regards to bringing this talent in, and it was lost within within a couple of months, less than the 3-month period. And this seems to be consistent what we're seeing with organizations in trying to retain or even acquire. So acquiring and having the issue of, I'm going to bend over backwards. I'm not going to implement these standard clauses of bringing the right talent in, like protecting that if you leave before 3 months, that, my relocation costs are going to be recouped, that kind of stuff. And then also in retaining them, well, they lost them as soon. So that's just an example of some of the large issues that we see.
Yeah, for sure. No, and we see it quite a bit in the Toronto area too. We call it the Shopify effect. That the larger companies are coming in and hiring a lot of the talent, and so it's pretty tough to find people. But so let's move on to the other question we asked was related to that difficulty in getting technical talent, but we asked, how does it impact your company goals? And so, not surprisingly, it does have a significant impact, and primarily in being able to deliver, meet time to market expectations, obviously reducing revenue growth, and also interestingly increasing that technical debt, because you're taking more shortcuts to try to make do with the resources that you have. So Robert, I suspect that you see something similar with your clients. Do you have an example of a sort of typical client that comes to you for help, and what kind of impact is this problem having on their business?
Sure, and it's very common that we see in regards to the individuals that come to us. And here's an example, I guess, of a client. So this particular client, was medium-sized organization, SaaS client. They basically, what they focused in on and who they targeted was in the aviation industry. So they're a SaaS organization with regards to helping private jets companies with regards to the scheduling and management of their fleet. And one of the biggest issues that they had identified here was their clients were having issues with regards to optimization of fuel consumption, and that the whole management of that fleet when it comes to refueling, where are the planes, and all the rest. And so, long story short, they were encountering an issue whereby they were unable to deliver on the innovation of their product today. And so they were seeing, as you can see here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, was the average delay in product roadmap was 4.6 months. Their technical debt, as you had identified, was something like 14% per month. And, their turnover was obviously just unacceptable, And so what they were faced with was really the bigger issues with regards to how do we innovate fast enough before our competitors take over? how are we going to able to achieve and solve this problem? And the problem was the route optimization and all the rest. And how are we going to get to that point? And we'll talk a little bit about where they eventually went to. This is very consistent with the types of clients that we're seeing today.
Mm-hmm. And how, yeah, we're going to talk about how they got there too. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, good. So that's, there's a bunch of other interesting data out of the survey. And I guess, for everybody that's online, we certainly are thinking about some additional, webinars diving into some of those, because there are some other interesting elements to it. But what we wanted to focus on today was really those key success factors and strategies for, overcoming, the challenges with limited resources so that you could continue to deliver great product. And so we're going to go through sort of what we see as three key success factors. And we'll talk about each of those in turn and give you some examples. So the first one is solve the right problems. And if you're like most product teams that we see, you're probably getting overwhelmed by that fire hose of issues and problems and bug reports and all that sort of stuff. So it's really difficult to know what are the right problems to work on. And just before we go into a little more detail on this, we'd like to do a quick poll with you and see what's happening with your teams. So if I can launch the poll there. So all of you should be able to see the poll that says, how do you currently manage the pool of issues and problems you get from stakeholders? And there's a number of options here, somewhat I guess common in many industries is that the loudest stakeholders get listened to first. You may also just be so overwhelmed with them that you're just adding them to the end of the queue, or you just deal with what's urgent. And then there's some others that have been able to sort of group them and be able to maybe prioritize them with some sort of method that makes sense in that environment. So we'll just give another minute or so, for half a minute or so, for other people to vote. We've got a few more to go, and then I'll show you the results. So yeah, I mean, Robert, one of the things that I've seen a lot is just that sense of urgency and dealing with that most of the time, as opposed to making space for what's important.
That's right.
And
That's right.
then yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to agree with you. The sense of urgency, and it's interesting because it seems like a lot of the urgency, from what I've seen as well too, is coming from the CEO. That sense of what's important is that the CEO is usually a lot of times the one that drives a big factor in regards to that.
Yeah, and actually, the reason is because the CEO is usually dealing with the largest customers and probably sometimes the most disgruntled customers. And so they have a particular view on what is urgent and what needs to be solved.
That's right.
It's a constant battle to try to prioritize that. Okay, great.
That's right.
Let's share the results of them here. And you should be able to see the polling results.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm actually pleasantly surprised to see that that a majority of people are using some sort of weighting or scoring mechanism to prioritize. But obviously there are groups that are really struggling with with how to filter that and sort it. And so I want to talk a little bit about how you can handle those issues in a scalable way. And let me just move on to the next one. So when we talk about managing issues, and what I'm talking about is problems and issues that come up in discovery or at sort of the front end of your product your product process. And what I've seen is that most product teams really struggle with defining the problems in the first place before they even come up with solutions. And they're not spending enough time in that discovery or upfront phase to truly understand the depth of the problem and the impact of that problem or the issue on the customer or user, as well as the impact on their own product strategy. So, maybe you're sticking Post-it notes on the wall and moving them around to prioritize them, or maybe you're using something like Trello to keep track of all the issues. But one of the first questions to ask when you're swamped or overwhelmed by inputs is, which ones are worth spending more time or investing more time in understanding and solving? And so if you have a constant stream of issues or problems from sales requests or support issues or bugs, your own customer discovery interviews, stuff that your executives want, the list just goes on and on. You need some way of filtering that. And one of the things that I've done with a number of clients is to develop a prioritization process. And when we think of prioritization, we usually use it with, sort of the requirements or features, maybe user stories to help groom the backlog. But why not use prioritization at the front end of the process as well? So why not prioritize the problems and issues at the beginning so we know which ones are worth the investment to work on solving? And so I've worked with a number of clients to sort of triage their problem statements, much like an emergency department at a hospital is constantly triaging patients, except for them, it's mostly handling the most urgent cases. But with product teams, we can establish a set of criteria to validate further investment of time to get more information or to evaluate the issue. And the criteria is going to be specific to your business, but you could start with something very simple like, is there a user story or job to be done that tells what the goal or the outcome is? Is there a goal or outcome that should not happen, like an anti-goal? Are there risks, if we don't solve this? Can we quickly get more information or data to test our assumptions? And is there, some kind of hypothesis for a possible solution? And if the answer is yes to all of these, then the issue sort of passes the test of a validated problem. And then you can use prioritization on the validated problems to select the ones that, are most impactful on your product strategy. And what this does is it reduces a significant amount of noise by eliminating or deferring problems that are vague and not worthy yet of further investment. Another thing I found that helps a lot is to socialize these criteria with all your internal stakeholders. The ones that are making requests or submitting issues so that they understand that the requests they are making have a cost to assess, solve, and deliver. They can increase the possibility that their problem will be validated and prioritized if they can satisfy some or all of their criteria. And so this could be a way for some of you if you're really overwhelmed by the inputs and just struggling with doing what's urgent, is to start to filter that a bit so that you can then focus on the validated problems and really be able to work with those.
And I think that the noise there, Lee, I think is probably one of the biggest issues, that you said. I think a lot of organizations that when they chat about is that the noise is probably the biggest concern, right, in regards to it.
Right, exactly, yeah. So let's look at the second key success factor, and that's align roadmaps with strategy. But before we talk about this, how to do this, let's do another quick poll and see what's happening with, your teams when it comes to getting stuff on your roadmap. And so let me just switch the poll here. And so you should be seeing the question. So tell us what's on your current roadmap, or how does stuff get onto the roadmap? Does it depend on the audience? Is it, responding to what the CEO's latest, agenda is? Is it high priorities for sales and customer requests? Is it stuff that, development is interested in building, and is it or is it customer problems that you're working on solving? So what kind of things get on to your roadmap and end up being things that you get committed to.
Mm-hmm. This is interesting. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen on this poll here, because I mean I've seen a slew of responses with previous individuals we've chatted with and stuff. Everything ranging from CEO to well, it's whatever development wants. This would be
Right,
interesting to see
right, right,
how people are prioritizing and getting stuff on.
right. Yeah. Okay. I'll just give it a few more seconds, see if we can get a couple more people here. Um, it seems, yeah, like, well, let's take a look at the results. Okay. So I'm going to share the results with you, and you can now see that yeah, a majority of people are really focused on customer problems that are that have been sort of justified or validated, and they're working on solving that kind of thing. There's some obviously, sort of managing, high pressure, inputs from sales, to close big deals or things like that, and that's to be expected. I think that's, we all kind of understand that that's part of the process. But the thing is to be able to minimize those sorts of things so that you're not dealing with them all the time, and that your roadmap doesn't get overwhelmed by by those kind of requests that can be all over the map.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Lee, you said in your previous slide when we were talking about key success factors. Tell me a little bit about, explain what you meant by align roadmaps with strategy.
Sure. So, I think basically, the purpose of a roadmap is to align and set the product strategy, right? And what we see a lot of product teams getting into is a trap of making commitments to a list of features. And I think it's important to state that a product roadmap is not simply a schedule of features or your backlog, and in other words, it's not a Gantt chart with tasks and timelines and stuff like that. It's really a communication tool for aligning your organization around the big picture and strategy. In other words, what initiatives are going to drive the business goals, expand your markets, address competition, or create customer value. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously you have to start with the product vision and strategic goals that fit with the strategic direction of the company, those business objectives. And, time and time again, when I talk to executives, they want that to be top down. Like they want to have articulated the strategic direction of the company, and then really have product strategies and other strategies align and drive that. And so it's important to show how that product vision and strategy drives the business objectives. It's also important to keep the product roadmap at a high level sort of strategic perspective, by remembering that the goal of the roadmap is to communicate and get alignment on that vision and strategy,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that you've got stakeholder engagement on that. And then you can define the goals, the product goals, and metrics that make sense for stakeholders. So they might be things like reduce churn, upsell new services, reduce technical debt, achieve competitive differentiation, expand geographically, maybe it's increase mobile adoption or something like that. So you really want to set those goals and then have visible metrics so that the stakeholders can see where things are at and how we're progressing. And then from there, you can develop your detailed release plan and your backlog, where you do have specific features and they're tied back to the specific strategic goals. And what I see time and time again is that stuff gets on the roadmap that isn't clear how it drives a strategic goal. And so it's really important to make sure that you're prioritizing the outcomes that support the business objectives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Let's see. Okay, so so let's move on to the final success factor. Robert?
Yeah, we're going to optimize. We're going to talk a little bit about optimizing resources, and let's break that down a little bit further here, I guess, in regards to
Yeah.
managing limited resources.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Do
good.
you want to talk a little bit about the, and I'll kick it off then with the poll?
Yeah, let me just sort of describe what we see as the sort of scope of this, and then we can jump into a poll. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's kind of there's probably more ways, obviously more strategies for managing limited resources, but there's kind of four key ones that we think are important to consider. The first one is to look for opportunities to save time, and by that I mean, as you're solutioning, use divergent thinking and really try to come up with options that are simple solutions that may not require a lot of resources or development resources to implement. And sometimes that increases technical debt with it, which is a trade-off that you might have to make. But it's worth going through that exercise to identify if there's something simpler that would work. The second is to really continuously improve your processes, and that's that's something that I think we do when there's an issue. We take a look at the process and we try to fix something that's broken. But there's also a kind of regular inspection to make sure that we're using our resources, the available resources, as effectively as possible. And that might be the way they take stuff off the backlog, or the number of times that we're grooming it, which I'll get into in a second, or it may be how you're evaluating and prioritizing issues on the front end. So those are all things to look at. The third is to constantly groom the backlog, and I think this is we all sort of know this intuitively and by practice, but it actually doesn't happen as often as it should, and it is a bit time consuming. But it also, if it's done properly and has the highest value work at the top, then your development team, your development resources can really work through the solution, implement it, and then they don't even have to ask you what's next, because they can just look at the backlog and they know that what's at the top is the next thing that's most important. And the final strategy is to look at ways you could extend your team. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, where you can evaluate and leverage partners to cover some of those gaps that, that may occur in your own existing resources. So Robert, let's switch to the poll again.
Yeah, let's go.
And I'll just pull that up a second. Okay, so you should, everyone, you should see a poll here that says, select your main concern you have in working with a third-party partner. And there's a number of options here. I think we made this multiple choice, so obviously you can choose more than one.
Select more than one,
yeah. So it basically boils down to, maybe you don't have the experience in managing a third party. Maybe you're not sure how you can trust them, or that you really are concerned about your intellectual property and keeping that in-house. Communication is often a challenge working with third parties, especially if they're all, somewhere remote. Or it may boil down to, their skills or getting them up to speed. Maybe you tried working with a partner and it ended up being expensive. Or maybe you've worked with a partner and it was great. Those are all considerations.
Sure, sure, absolutely. And there's a whole bunch of reasons.
Yeah, we'll just give another few seconds and see if we get one or two more people here. We've got a majority of people that have voted already. So there we go. Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So I'll just end the poll and show you what it looks like. Interesting. Yeah. I mean,
Getting them up to speed. Yeah.
Yeah, getting them up to speed is interesting. Yeah, that's certainly a concern, and actually we'll talk a little bit about some of the strategies you can use to handle that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Domain knowledge. Yeah, these all make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, another one that's obvious there is the intellectual property and the trust issue. Like, those are things that, need to be dealt with up front, right?
Yes,
So,
you get
okay.
control.
So yeah, so let's dive into a little bit more about extending the team and what.
Sure.
What kind of things you can do there. And Robert, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Absolutely, absolutely. So, and that's interesting information, and but I think in a lot of cases, kind of expected with some of the answers. So, what we'll walk through right now is the opportunities and when you're working with a partner and some of the things to ask. So, the first is, and some of these are pretty obvious, I think, but some of them may not necessarily be. So the first is, when you're asking and you're looking and you're vetting out for a particular partner to assist you in your roadmap and the execution of it is, the first question is, are their customers satisfied? I mean, it's an obvious question, but you'd be surprised how some organizations don't ask that question. They don't get to the nitty-gritty of understanding and saying, let me see some of the references. Let me see some of the organizations you've currently worked with, and tell me a little bit about what their issues or what their problems were and how they overcame that. What was the solution? So that's definitely a question that should be top of mind when you're trying to look for a partner. The second is, which is kind of related in other ways, is, looking for specifics with regards to business cases. So, what are areas that they've worked with that are related to your business? If you're in healthcare, as an example, have they done any work in healthcare? Have they done any work in manufacturing? Whatever it is, whatever your focus is, you want to have a good understanding to that. The third item, which is not obvious to most organizations, is, what areas of expertise are they invested in? So what I mean by that is this. With a good partner, when they have the capabilities in-house where they have securities or quality assurance, and I don't mean by that is they are helping you deliver on your roadmap. Let's say, for example, they're doing some form of development or they're taking over a project. They may have these capabilities internally, part of their execution capabilities, but if they have the capabilities like quality assurance, it's a department, it's a service, it's an offering outside of just the engagement itself, that partner's very deep in that area, and that things like security, quality assurance will be baked into any engagement you have with them. So these are questions you want to ask and say, do you have a quality assurance department outside of just the engagement of what you're providing to me? Because what they have to do is they have to invest in developing that service and that vertical within their business, and the level of depth that they're going to provide you is going to be twofold, 2-3 times fold more. The next question is, how are they going to manage the project? And in some cases, you want to understand a little processes, but the bigger question there is, it may not be the response of how they're going to manage the project versus, what's their process to understand your processes, your needs, because every department, every organization is different. The next question would be things like, identify your security measures. We want to understand what your security measures are. Do you have any regulations? Are you being managed by government regulations? Things like GDPR, which is obviously very big in the European states and now becoming more prevalent, obviously, in North America. And any other regulations or internal regulations. These are things you want to do. And then understand, and it sounds pretty obvious, but you understand the financial and contractual terms. And what I mean by that is not just when you need to pay, but what are the stipulations for payment? Are you building in milestones? Are you building in progress? And we'll talk a little bit about what that means, not just a specific date. And contractually as well too, you want to see things like, what does this mean from an intellectual property? What does this mean from the development and the knowledge? And these are the types of questions that you kind of want to go through so that you can better understand, who is this partner, who is this organization that you're going to be trusting with as we go through your process.
So that's great, Robert. And let's talk a little bit about how do you actually go about managing a partner?
Yeah, great question. And so, there's a bunch of things that you can do in regards to managing a partner. And I've put it down to this kind of 6 bullet points. If you kind of go through all this, you're probably be in a very good state with regards to, managing expectations. So first and foremost is develop a plan. And I don't necessarily mean a project plan or, a delivery plan. More importantly, in building your plan is building into it the roles and responsibilities, within your organization and within your partner's organization. A lot of times this area gets missed. You sign off on a contract, you build out an agreement, I need this type of skill set, I need this type of project, or I need this timeline and all the rest. But what you miss out on is roles and responsibilities. And that's key on both sides, because as a partner, they need to understand where you're going to fit in. And vice versa, you need to understand where they're going to be delivering out the services. The second item or task that I would identify is, perform your due diligence. And what I mean by that is, are you building in for sense of trust or the project, depending how big it is, or what's the engagement look like? Are you going to be building in assessment milestones? Are you going to be building in a sense of auditing? So do your due diligence throughout that process. The next is, measure your KPIs and really understand what does success and progress mean to you. Is it timelines? Is it the execution of a particular engagement or project? What are those numbers? And so, you can't, it's like that old saying, you can't manage success without metrics, right? You don't know what success looks like unless you have metrics that go around that. Okay. And then keep monitoring, like back to, performing your due diligence. Don't just build your KPIs, continue to monitor that. And also as well to consider the risks associated with it. When you do a work, when you work with your partners, do a risk assessment. Understand what your risks are. Communicate that to your partner of what the risks are associated with it, and vice versa. Understand what their risks are. And to give you an example of this is, in a lot of cases, you'll be delivering out a project. You want your partner to deliver out on an engagement, and it just so happens that the timeline happens to be a delivery of September. Now that we're in August, and here comes September, and you have to deliver out. What you may not have identified in the risk is that your internal organization happens to have scheduled a large company get-together or the annual retreat, as an example. And so you've got this annual retreat that's scheduled for September. You're kind of leading into the next year. September's the time frame you did it, but you also scheduled this release of a product, only to realize that when you get to September, your internal resources that are their role and their responsibility potentially is not available, and therefore you're now delaying the process. These are the types of things that you want to communicate up front, because then you yourself will know what that end project will look like, but also your partner is going to understand, okay, this is what we need to deal with, and how do we mitigate that? Because that's what risk all at the end of the day is how do you mitigate? There's always risk, high level, high, medium, or low, but how do you mitigate that risk? And then the last is partnership relationship, and I think I've said that many a times here is, you got to consider your partner not as a provider, but as truly a partner. They're there to work with you. And it's that old cliche of, your success is their success, but truly that's what it means, right? When working with them and identifying what are your risks, what are you trying to work towards, what's the objectives, who are the roles and responsibilities, and what everybody's expected to do. When you have that partnership relationship, it takes it to another level relevant to your delivery.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So Robert, just a sec. One of the things that came up on the poll is that about a third of the participants were concerned about intellectual property and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to move on to that and talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's great. Let's go to the next slide, which is great because how to retain IP and knowledge. I think it's one of the areas that, as you saw in the poll, and in discussions with individuals, that's one area that's the biggest concern. When working with a partner, and I've kind of walked through some of the items here, as you'll see listed on your screen. So partnership is, as it says there, partnership is not an all or nothing approach. It does not mean that, you're all in and you lose out on your knowledge and your intellectual property, and you're going to lose control. That's not the case when engaging with that. And here are some of the ways to do that. So the first is, back to your, doing a legal review in regards to it. So, you want to understand, what does this engagement look like? Who owns the intellectual property? Is it a licensing or non-licensing? Are you expecting your partner to kind of invest in some of the development? Depending on your engagement and how you structured with the engagement with them and the partnership with them, you want to understand just the simple legalese behind it. Are you able to resell it? A lot of businesses today are building products, for a future sale of the business. These are things that you want to understand. The second component is, internal knowledge workers. Like I said, it's not an all or nothing type of approach. You have to, what I've seen biggest success is when you focus in on your internal team and the value of those workers, you want to build that internal knowledge. You want to utilize your partner for areas and, for example, for development and such, but you still have your internal knowledge individuals. That area doesn't get lost. And we recommend and support that you build that type of capabilities in-house. But that doesn't mean that you're now limited to those knowledge workers and you now don't have the ability to scale, because by using and utilizing a partner, you want to tap into having that team environment whereby they're kind of building out that scalability, but you still have those value internal workers. The other point is, don't rely on individual contractors. That's where you lose out on intellectual property. That's where you're going to lose out on the knowledge. Because, I've seen this over and over where, we'll talk to organizations and say, yeah, we've got a contractor. So it's a one person, and they're in, wherever they are, remote or local, whatever have it be. And we're utilizing that individual. A good partner, and this, back into when looking and vetting for a good partner, they will build in and bake into every engagement the ability to do how knowledge is going to be transferred, how it's going to be retained within the team. So if your project is more than a one-time affair and you're actually building a partnership, they will build in a process to say, this is how knowledge is going to be retained. And this is how we're going to transfer knowledge if your strategy changes tomorrow, whereby you now want to have more of an internal growth with regards to knowledge workers and shift some of the partnership's responsibilities. That would be baked into engagement versus an individual where they're here today, gone tomorrow, and then you're kind of calling on documentation, back to technical debt. Where is that documentation? Where is that information that I have? And then the last thing is, every good partner will have an integrated security and identity protection program. These are things like NDAs. They should be asking for security measures. They should be asking you to, if you haven't done it, they should be outright saying, hey, where are the NDAs? Where are the documentation that you want to go through? And these are just some of the few facts that you want to build in that to help you retain this intellectual property, this knowledge.
Great. That's good. Yeah, let's keep moving just so we can have some time for some Q&A. And by the way, for everybody that's online, if you have questions, please open up the Q&A dialog box and type your question in there, and we'll get to them in a moment.
Perfect.
So I think the other one that was a big concern was around building trust with that partner. Why don't you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, let me go through that, and I'll breeze through these because I agree with you. I'd like to keep some time for Q&A at the end. So, trust is obviously the biggest concern, another big concern as well, too. And there's a couple of things that you want to do with regards to trust. So first is, understand the rationale for using a partner. So when you're strategically saying to yourself, you want to use a partner, now is the time, you see the potential for scalability, you see the opportunity at hand. Take a strategic approach. Do the analysis, design, and mapping process. Don't take a tactical approach. Don't go over and say, I have a project, here's a project. Take that strategic approach as a step one. Step two is, frame your requirements. Decide on what you want your partner to do. Document those details either in a contract and a documentation as part of the overall engagement. And understand the responsibilities and the time frames for the delivery itself. Identify what the right strategic partner is. And I had said this before, when you're looking for the right partner is, use references or even use existing business relationships as one way. More importantly, which I've seen in a lot of organizations is, go through the pilot project, identify, that project that you want to utilize to understand how the partner works, how you work, and how you guys work together. And use that pilot project to build the trust. And I've said this as well. Treat the provider as a partner, and there's a difference between the two. If when looking for a partner, there is strategic value and there's opportunity to be had. When you're looking at a provider and you're just saying, oh, I just want somebody to deliver, then you're kind of taking that tactical approach and not the strategic approach. And that's how you start to build trust, is when you have that. And the last point is kind of folds into all those is communicate. Trust comes over time. Does not matter, at the end of the day, all the processes that they've outlined, other clients that have shown the success and provided testimonials. At the end of the day, you want to have that communication process in place so that you can continue to identify, here are the areas that we need to work on, and here are the areas that, that are successful, and what are the metrics behind it. Everything needs to be metric driven. If it's not metric driven, success is too unknown in regards to that. And I think Lee, maybe we can maybe jump to the next slide, and we can kind of close it off with that stuff.
I mean, it sounds like there's definitely some benefits of working with a partner if you set it up carefully. And go ahead, Robert. And
no, absolutely.
Tell us about that case study and what the results were.
Sure. Sure. And and once again, is, as I said, that, the right partner helps you improve processes and access to expert skills when you need them. Remember, building a partner relationship is different as a provider relationship. And really when you get to a partner relationship, the opportunities there are, you're going to get access to a large talent pool and the latest technology. I mean, that's what a partner's responsibility is, to build up that area, and the processes around it, and having the right level of, skill sets, senior skill sets that can deliver out immediately. You're going to be able to also increase your core focus, your core business. You'll be able to, focus in on those areas. And these are numbers, these are real world numbers that we've seen. You're looking at, in areas of 40% cost savings, scalability, better security, and ultimately what it comes down to is time to market. You're ultimately trying to achieve a quicker time to market because, competitive landscape is out there, it's very prevalent. You want to get out there as quickly as possible. Leverage partnerships to deliver that solution. And, and that kind of leads to, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, just tell us about that earlier study or case study that you told us about.
Absolutely. And so, as I said at the beginning, and kind of leading into it, is, this organization, as I said, they utilize that partnership model. They had identified that their internal resources didn't have the necessary skill sets. They had roadblocks in regards to their roadmap. The competitive landscape was increasing, on a monthly basis. They were seeing, competitors popping up left, right, and center and delivering the solution. The one thing that they had as an advantage, they already had obviously an install base. And so what they needed to do to ensure that their clients weren't walking out the doors, they had to deliver on this. And as I said, as you can see on the screen, their average delivery was 4.6 months, and now that's down to less than 1 week. Their technical debt had gone from 14 to 2%, and their turnover had gone from 40% to less than 4%. And really, the whole process is, and the issues that they had in regards to that was they were too focused. They had they didn't have the necessary skill sets internally, not only technical, to deliver on the innovation, but they didn't have the processes in place. They didn't have the understanding, both from a leadership and an execution perspective, to deliver out on this solution of how do I optimize fuel consumption? How do I get there's something that's a manual process today that's very labor intensive with clients, and we need to automate that, because that's really the key factor that's going to make it's going to be a winning feature within our solution that's going to keep our clients with us and not moving on. How do we get that? How do we save our clients money and move to that next step? And they identified that this was the way to do it, and working with them, they were able to achieve this and achieve revenue uplift and upsell, and keep clients in house as well too, right? Which is the biggest feature.
Yeah, it's a nice example of that. So we just have a few minutes left, and I want to be able to take a few questions. But we talked initially about the sort of business impact of missing delivery dates and not meeting commitments on the roadmap. Those kind of boil down to slowing the time to market, increasing technical depth, and ultimately impacting revenue. But we also talked about the sort of key success factors and the kinds of things that you might do to, sort of systemically address the issue. And those go from solving the right problems in the first place so that you're focused on the right ones, making sure that your roadmap is actually driving your business objectives, and then ultimately optimizing your resources and through a variety of methods, but also considering, working with a partner that can complement the work that you're doing. So let's open it up for questions. For those of you that online, there's a Q&A a button that you should bring up a dialog box that you can type a question into. One person asked, with respect to the poll, with the polls that we did with the group, you know, how many people were that, just, you know, to get some idea of the sample size. So we've got like 30 some. So so it's actually, yeah, it's you know, it's more than a few people, but I think we've got a good cross section of responses and you know, people from different areas. So here's another one, maybe Robert, you can talk to this a little bit. What does the typical process look like as you work with a partner over time?
Sure, sure. And, you know, and it kind of speaks a little bit to you know, some of the points I've mentioned before. You know, you want to take it, depending on where your engagement is, depending on, you know, what your needs are. You know, you first want to go and do your due diligence and understand and do a modeling and what's the impact, you know, gain an understanding in regards to what is the value that a partner is going to provide you. So first and foremost, before you do any type of engagement, you know, you want to understand the numbers, you know, what's the volume, what's the risks, and what's the fit in regards to that. Once you've done that, the recommendation then is you know, you want to confirm that, and you want to confirm that model. So work with a partner in regards to that. And as I said before, I would suggest, you know, things like pilot projects, or, you know, working with them in various capacities. That's the, you know, the best part. Once you've started to do that, it's a natural evolution, I think, with working with any partner is that, you know, you want to utilize their capabilities. I mean, this is what they're there for. You know, a provider is a body shop. A partner is somebody who can provide you more than just skill sets, you know, individuals. It's something that can provide you processes. They can help you to optimize your own internal processes, not just utilizing their services. They're providing you this knowledge. This is something that they should have been doing for many years. So you want to start leveraging that. You want to start taking that internally. You want to start moving to, you know, some consulting with them, you know, and it's constant measurement. And then from that, you're kind of, you know, going your roadmap, then it kind of goes into advisory and starts moving into more strategic discussions. So as you can see, you start small, kind of move all the way up into this advisory and strategic discussion, and you want to utilize their services and their internal knowledge, because, you know, that's what they're there for, and that they've got a lot of information, and they should be able to deliver that to you outside of just, you know, the paid engagement. It's a partnership, and that's where, you know, they need to leverage that some information, and you need to leverage them for that.
Good, yeah. So we just have a minute or so left. Why don't you talk to the audience about what kind of things they can do next? What is the kind of the next step for,
sure,
if you found this stuff useful?
Sure. You know, and so what we do is like we said before, when it comes to, you know, understanding from a strategic standpoint, what's the value that can be added. You know, we recommend, and we've had organizations, and even the organization that we put up earlier, we went through this 30-minute, you know, discovery session, and it's free of charge, obviously, and really what that does is it's going to help us have a discussion in regards to, you know, how to build a product strategy, how you're going to gain an understanding in regards to it, you know, how you can overcome some of the budget overruns, and, you know, the list of items here, missed milestone objectives. We go through a process. We actually analyze some of the details. We'll go through a 5-type risk analysis process as well too, and model it for you. And so what we do is, it's usually about 30 minutes. We sit down, you know, on a phone call. We'll have a discussion, and then we'll produce this report for you that will show, is there value in it, and where is the value, and how you can go from where you are today to where you can be in a couple of months, from now, and what are the savings, what are the opportunities, and where are the gaps that you can potentially fill in. And we found it to be helpful because it kind of gets you from that point of grades, a lot of good information, but how does this relate to me? I need to understand a little bit more about, what are the opportunities I have? And so we go through this 30-minute free discovery call, really to understand a little bit about, we'll ask you some questions and walk you through it. And then, you'll get a better understanding of, is there value in it for you or not? And if there is, where?
Yeah. So Robert, how can they get a hold of you? If they're
sure. I think the next slide I've got, so feel free, there's my email address. If twofold, if you're interested in the discovery call, just send me an email. You can also go to our website there. You'll probably see some button there that says schedule a free discovery call. Feel free to just send me an email directly. And more importantly as well, too, if you have any other questions outside of this, feel free to just ping me. More than happy to answer any other questions that we may not have gotten to, or any other questions that you have that you may have thought of after the webinar.
Yeah, that's great. So we're going to wrap up now. We're out of time, but thank you everybody for joining. And as Robert said, get in touch with us if you have other questions, and we'll send out a follow-up feedback survey, so that'll have information on how to get a hold of us too. So thanks for your time. Have a good rest of the day, and we'll hopefully talk to you at some point soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.